Hey all, today we are going to continue using trig functions, and we're going to sort of use them in the opposite way that we did in the last lesson, and they're called inverse trig functions. So here I have a right triangle, and I do know two side lengths, but this time I'm not interested in finding side length, I'm interested in finding out how big is that angle. And so when we know two sides in a right triangle and we're looking for one of the angle measures, we can still use our trig functions. So like I did in the last lesson, I'm writing my trig functions out. And I'm also going to label my sides. That's my hypotenuse. The side opposite from the angle I want to know is 26, and my adjacent side is 48. And so I know how long the opposite and the adjacent sides are, and so it's in my best interest to use tangent to find how big this measure is. And so I can write my equation like this. The tangent question mark goes in there because that's where the angle belongs. This time we don't know the angle. And then tangent is my opposite 26 or my adjacent 48. So the big question, the new thing here is how do we remove the question mark from the tangent function so that we can figure out how big it is. And what's great about this is that we have functions that are opposite of our sine, cosine, and tangent called inverse functions, and we can use those to sort of cancel out and leave us with just question mark. And so an inverse function looks like the functions we had with this -1. Okay, it's not, this means the inverse of tangent. So just like multiplying and dividing cancel each other out, adding and subtracting cancel each other out, square roots and squares or second powers cancel each other out, these inverse functions cancel each other out. So we actually have on this side this inverse and this tangent canceling, leaving us only with the question mark. And of course, anything we do to one side of an equation, we have to do to the other to balance it out. And so we'll do the tangent inverse of this fraction as well. So this is what our equation ends up looking like. And this is simply a calculator feature. There's an inverse tangent, cosine, and sine on your calculator, which I obviously will show you in class when we have the calculators in front of us. But I would just plug this into my calculator to find out that my angle is approximately 28.44 degrees. So let's try another one. Again, I'm looking for this angle. 46 is my hypotenuse. This side that I don't know the length of is my opposite side because it's across from my angle. And so 24 is adjacent. I'm going to write out my three formulas, basically my three options, which function do I want to use. In this case, I know the adjacent and the hypotenuse side. Adjacent and hypotenuse tells us to use cosine. So I can write this equation that the cosine of my angle is equal to the adjacent 24 over the hypotenuse 46. To cancel out that cosine, I need to use the cosine inverse function. And so again, this cosine inverse and this cosine cancel, leaving just the question mark. And what I do to the left, I must do to the right. So my equation ends up looking like this, and I can do the cosine inverse function in my calculator to get 58.55 degrees. And again, I will show you how to do that function in your calculator in class. So let's do one last one together. I'm looking for an angle again. 24 is my hypotenuse. 23 is opposite the angle I'm looking for. And then this side that I don't know is my adjacent side. I'm writing my three options down. And I see that I know the opposite and I know the hypotenuse, so that means sine is the function we're going to use. I write my equation. So I'm going to skip a step here, and once you're comfortable with this, you can skip a step. I'm going to take the sine inverse of both sides, and I know when I take the sine inverse of this left side, all I'm going to be left with is question mark, so I'm just going to write it that way. And then on my right is the sine inverse of my fraction, 23 over 24. This is a calculator input that I'm going to show you in class, and you'll end up finding that that angle is approximately 73.4 degrees. So I want you to try one. If you don't have a calculator, it's going to be very hard to find the final answer, but I want you to get as far as you can, meaning I want you to end up, and let me show you here, I want you to end up at this step where you would be putting it into your calculator and finding the final answer. So get to that step here, make sure you choose the correct function. If you have questions, be ready to ask in class.